that a phone? Plug in? Don't step on
Oh yeah, that's your. What one do you have?
The 12.
That's the 12? Oh, do you have a stand for it? Oh, I was about to say, I thought it was one of the like the cool ones, like what are the,
I was
like
waiting for you.
the ones that like
Aw. The charging port doesn't work no more. So I have to charge it up.
So again, right, we're gonna start, and you guys are pretty noisy. Now, are you noisy compared to a high school class, a ninth grade class? No. I know what that's noisy. So I wanna recognize that you guys are settling down, but you've gotta get used to that, right? The other thing is, next year, when you're in college classes, the likelihood that you're with so many of your close friends is pretty low. But I can tell you from experience, having a professor in a class this big or bigger or smaller say to you, my name's Mike, you need to stop talking. It's really, really embarrassing. Right? And so so when someone stands up in front of you, then here's what you should be doing. Number one, you should stop talking. Number two, you should get your notes out, put any type of devices away, whether I tell you or not. Your phone shouldn't be up and so that you're visible, right? If the phones are out, they should be at the very least notifications up on your desk face down. You shouldn't have any earbuds in, no type of devices in your ears. Like this class right here is meant for you to be listening to this. And finally is that the other thing that you have to recognize is that what you're experiencing in this class, you're never going to experience again in your life. You're never going to get material explained to you in this much detail. So I could take this entire chapter and make it into a 15-minute lecture. So what would I do? I'd set the same amount of material and I would just summarize it in a single slide or talk about it in a single slide and then go on to the next thing. So all of those different cells that I talked about, so some of which are right here, I wouldn't spend a lot of time talking about them. So here's a list of the cells. There's many types, and here's a main group. They either make stuff or they protect against infection. They make fat and lipids, right? They store that, and they can make proteins, and then we'll just go on to that. So you have to understand is that when you sit down at a lecture, you need to be ready to write everything down that the professor or the instructor says, because if you're not, you're gonna get left behind. Okay. Once again, this whole chapter here, I started it on Wednesday rather. We'll continue it until tomorrow. You're never going to get this much detail in a chapter in any other forum. So the material is still going to be required. And this is what happens to you guys, the Toronto students, but generally high school students too. Well, they didn't talk about this stuff in lecture. Yeah, but it's in the book, so you should know it. This is by far and away the hardest chapter so far. I'm trying to go over it spend a lot of time on it. And one of the reasons why I'm able to spend a lot of time on it is because of the way that I designed this class. The same amount of material is expected, or more, is expected down on the main campus. And they just don't spend as much time. They might spend 2 lectures, maybe 1.5 lectures, something like that, and then they'll go on. Okay? Extracellular matrix, or ECF. That extracellular matrix, or extracellular fluid, extracellular matrix. The term extracellular is stuff outside of the cell. Where is it coming from? Some cells that make it. The cells that make it, they spit it out. What's an example of something that they make? It could be a fibroblast, could be a chondroblast, an osteoblast. What are those things? There's fibers, there's cartilage, or bone. When you're talking about the stuff that is outside of the cell, there's extracellular matrix or extracellular fluid. So now, give me an example of extracellular fluid that we haven't talked about, that is also connective tissue?
Blood.
So what part of the blood?
The plasma.
So blood plasma, right? So that the blood cells, the leukocytes, thrombocytes, and erythrocytes are not extracellular fluid. The blood plasma is extracellular fluid. There's also lymph, and which is also a fluid. So that's what we're talking about there. And then generally the term would be anything outside of a cell would be plasma. That's, if you look at the diagram for the sodium potassium pump, it says blood plasma or plasma, and then it says, I forgot what the other part of it says inside the cell. So when we're talking about extracellular fluid or extracellular matrix here, there's stuff that's outside of the cell, and it falls into 3 large categories. There is stuff, well, first of all, the main protein here is collagen, and collagen is a 3 series of amino acids that are strung together, that are very, very long, and they come in groups of 3 polypeptide sequences, and those polypeptide sequences then are bound around one another, and they're very strong if you pull on the ends. If you pull on the sides of it, it's not very strong. You can get, and the integrity can get damaged easily. But it's a very strong, it's the most common protein in the body. The other example of a protein that I talked about already was hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a protein that is called globular, and if it's globular, then it's a ball shape. So now you make when we're talking about making amino acid sequences, what are we talking about? Dehydration synthesis. How do we do it? We take one amino acid, another amino acid, jam them together, take out some water, and we do it again and again and again. As you do that again and again and again, the amino acid sequence starts to form, and if it forms into a ball, and there's 4 polypeptide sequences surrounding an iron molecule, then you get hemoglobin, and if you get strands of 3 polypeptide sequences that are very long, and they coil around each other, you can get collagen. In either case, it's the same process. There's also other stuff, there's things, generally, there's this reticular material that will be fine and collagenous here, so that there's collagen in it. Right? And then there's a different type of protein called elastin. And elastin or elastic proteins is a protein that's able to withstand tension and then respond and then return to its original length. So it stretches and it returns back to it. So there's 3 main types of proteins, but of those 3, the most abundant one is collagen. Ground substance is another part of the stuff that's extracellular, and it's a major component of it. There's 3 main types of molecules that we're talking about here. There's hyaluronic acid, which is a lubricant, and it helps basically keep things moving. It is a polysaccharide, and so if it's a polysaccharide, what type of macromolecule is it? Well, it's not a protein, it's not a nucleic acid, it's not a lipid. A saccharide is a carbohydrate, and you should know that, right? Proteoglycans there are also another ways of, sort of the chemistry of it is not as abundant, but one of the things that it does do, it's able to trap water. It basically attracts water molecules to it, and so as a result of attracting water molecules to it, it increases the volume of water in your body without having water in a container. Right? And then finally, there are these adhesive molecules, and adhesive molecules are means of basically keeping things together. So these 3 molecules, form the ground substance here: hyaluronic acid, proteoglycans, and adhesive molecules. They keep water there. They are these polysaccharides, and then they're these keep the things together, everything together. So it keeps the integrity of it together. I said earlier here that collagen is a long stringy material here, and here's individual collagen fibers or collagen fibrils. So if you look at this where my pointer is, a fibril is an individual strand of collagen, and then if you get multiple strands of collagen together, then you have a fiber. So RIL means it's a little. So there's little collagen fibers, and then if you were to look at the chemical nature of this collagen fibril, there are multiple strands of polypeptide sequences that are bound around connected together. So this is an example of collagen, and again, if you pull on one end or the other, if you pull on it this way, it's very strong. If you pull on it this way, it doesn't handle the pressure very well. Elastic fibers are fibers that are easy to, they can get pulled in any direction and then they return to original position. And then there's these aggregates, they're hyaluronic acid and proteoglycans. We're not going to go through all these different classes of ways to classify connective tissue today. We're going to stop. I think it's a supporting connective tissue. But if you look at this group here, we have adult connective tissue, and there's a whole bunch of different types of adult connective tissue, but we're going to start talking about embryonic connective tissue. Embryonic connective tissue talks about, there's two types here. There's mesenchymal connective tissue and mucous connective tissue, and we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about that. We're going to, if you look at the adult connective tissue, the names mean something. There's loose and dense. Loose connective tissue, dense connective tissue, that should give you an idea of what it's going to do and what its fibers are going to be. And the fibers then actually go back to the collagen. If it's dense and it's regular, I'm going to tell you that all the fibers are lining up. So that if I'm sketching something, I have a series of parallel lines. Those would be the fibers that would be lined up. If those fibers are really close together, then it's dense regular. If it's dense irregular, the fibers go in every different direction. And that sort of, that. Supportive connective tissue, cartilage and bone, that should make sense. And then finally, there's irregular or weird connective tissue, and that's fluid connective tissue. So the other types of connective tissue at the top of this slide there are all either cellular or structural in nature. And these fluid connective tissue is this atypical connective tissue. So embryonic connective tissue come in two different ways there, or structures there, but we're going to really focus on these mesenchymal connective tissue. If you have a mesenchymal connective tissue, it's embryonic tissue. That embryonic tissue is building new tissues, it's building new things, and if it's building new things and new cells, how does it go about doing that? Through mitosis and cytokinesis. While the cells have extracellular matrix around it, right, we're really focused on the structure. If you look at a single cell, in 2 days there might be 12 cells. Right? So there's lots of cells that are going to be building new things and scattered throughout the body. So mesenchymal stem cells or mesenchymal embryonic connective tissue, a number of different ways of talking about that. Those mesenchyme is the thing that is undergoing mitosis and cytokinesis. The prefix CT up here, I hate the way they do that. That means connective tissue. I slowly but surely I go through this book, and whenever I see CT and I miss it, I type in connective tissue. So I did it down here, but there's different types of connective tissue, and we're talking about sort of a general type of connective tissue that's found in many places in the body. This includes loose connective tissue. Loose connective tissue is not very strong, and it, as the name would indicate, there's a fine network of fibers. Those fibers are oriented in multiple different directions there. The fibers include collagen and elastic fibers, or the protein, I will say in a minute, is called elastin, E-L-A-S-T-I-N. So the elastin and the collagen run in many different directions here. And if you look on the left-hand side of this, there's loose connective tissue that is deep to the epidermis in your skin, and that loose connective tissue helps you withstand movement and pressures from multiple different directions. In terms of the location here, is associated with the epithelial basement membrane. So that where are you going to find epithelial basement membrane? Whatever the epithelial tissue is, whether it's simple or stratified, the deepest part of the epithelial tissue is the basement membrane. There's going to be packing between these tissues there, between these structures here, including muscles and nerves, blood vessels and other glands, and other underlying tissues. So this is going to be always deep to the tissue itself that it's trying to support, and it's basically a supportive connective tissue. So this loose connective tissue or areolar connective tissue is one example. Adipose tissue is another example of a tissue that is loose. And loose connective tissue, this is not strengthening necessarily. And if you look over here on the left-hand side, this is a histology section right here, and you can barely see in several of them, like right where my pointer is. If you look around, there's this purple stuff that's surrounding that red dot. And that is, imagine what when I drew a cell on the board, and the cell had a whole bunch of cytoplasm or cytosol. I had all these different organs. It had the nucleus, endoplasmic reticulum, et cetera, et cetera. All of that is located in the periphery of the cell. So you see all this stuff right here? This is all the individual organelles of the cell. And what does an adipose tissue do, or adipose cell? An adipocyte is the cell. What does an adipocyte do? It takes a whole bunch of tissue, either glucose or lipids, it makes it into that triglyceride, and then in the process of making those triglycerides, it increases the volume of the cell, and as the process of increasing the volume of the cell, all the stuff that, the organelles of the cell get pushed to the side. So this is an adipocyte. You can see here, the nuclei are lateral in the cell, they're not centrally located. Here's a first example of what my drawing and what I have there are two different things. So this is reality, and what I drew is really not quite based in reality. Anything with adipose tissue here, there's two main types. There's brown adipose tissue, but that's in infants here, so we're not worried about that. Yellow adipose tissue is what's most abundant here in adults and people that are no longer very, very young. The structure here, little extracellular matrix. What does that mean? Little extracellular matrix. The cells are packed and there's not a lot of space between the cells. That's what it means. Adipocytes, or adipose tissue, so I've listed the adipocyte already. They're so full of lipids that the cytosol and the cytoplasmic elements there are pushed to the side. Where do you find them? They're all over the body, right? So including the kidneys, there are superficial areas of the kidneys that protection, the mesenteries, abdominal pelvic regions here, mammary glands, other loose connective tissue. Lots and lots of places where there's this material. And then the material then has a couple of different functions. Number one is it provides energy for the mitochondria. So that, and what is that going to do? When you take adipose tissue here, you take the lipid, and I told you that it just works as carbohydrates. I said it was just we talked about cell metabolism as just being carbohydrates, but I knew that I was simplifying it. Lipids also get put into cells, get broken down through glycolysis, the citric acid cycle. Did I say that? Right, for Krebs cycle, right? I think I call it the citric acid cycle. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then electron transport. So that's one function of adipose tissue. Another function is physical packing or protection. And then the last function is thermoregulation, is losing heat versus maintaining heat. Right? When you're cold, you want to maintain heat, and that's one of the functions. So adipose tissue is another form of loose connective tissue. This reticular tissue is basically fine structural elements of the that is found in organs here, particularly in lymphatic organs and lymph nodes. some bone marrow areas, and those basically they're these little dividing areas. So these little dividing areas that basically help provide internal structure. Reticular tissue is not found a lot in the body. Now, let's talk about, if you look at the picture at the top, the picture at the bottom here. So this picture at the top here is a picture of something that's called dense, regular connective tissue. And that dense, regular connective tissue has something else in it. It's collagenous. So it's a dense, regular, collagenous connective tissue. I could just call it dense connective tissue. If it's dense connective tissue and it's regular, the lines are parallel to one another, and they more or less, in this case, if you pull on this tissue either up or down, it would be able to withstand the pressure. If you pull on it this way or in another way, then it might not be able to. The strength of the collagen is basically is up and down. If you look down here, there's irregular connective tissue down here, and you can't, you can have the same amount of collagen, you can have the same amount of internal protein structure, but it's able to withstand pulling and tugging in multiple different directions. So this is unidirectional, this is unidirectional, I mean multi-directional, this is multi-directional. If you look at the names here of some of the things, this cell name that made this is a fibroblast. And when that cell then gets encompassed by something, it'll be a fibrocyte. And when it's making, and that's an adult structure and it's called a fibrocyte, right? That space, the thing that is surrounding is called a lacunae. And that lacunae is the thing that's going to distinguish between immature and mature cells. In both cases, they're making something, that fiber. What is that fiber? Well, this is collagenous connective tissue, so it's making collagen. So there are fibroblasts up here, there's fibrocytes up here, there's fibroblasts down here, and there's fibrocytes down here. Because they're collagenous fibrocytes, they're making collagen, and the strength of them are is the same, right? So a collagen protein is going to have the same level of strength. It's just the quantity of collagen found in that area. So at the top here, this withstands great forces exerted in the direction of the fibers, and down below here, it's called the tensile strength or the physical strength. You can withstand forces in multiple directions. This withstands forces in single direction. So one example of this would be a ligament or a tendon in a muscle here. And about, I think it was like 7 years ago, I had a problem with my tendons here. And I had a tendon that connected to my biceps muscle, and it broke. And my biceps muscle rolled up like a window shade, and I had a little bump right there. And the tendon that was connected to my radius, and particularly the radial tuberosity, that tendon had broken. So it rolls up, the doctor cuts I have a little scar right there. He told me he's just gonna reach up, pull the muscle down, have me bend my elbow while I was asleep, drill a hole in my radius, reach through, pull the muscle through, or the former tendon through, tie it off, and then as long as I wasn't silly, then the bone would grow over the tendon, and then it would reconnect. So that whole process was a minor thing. It didn't really hurt much at all. But these tendons that are attached to muscle and muscle to bone are really an integral part of it. Again, these are organized in a particular way. So that you pull it one direction, you can have damage. You pull it in another direction, it'll withstand the strain. So this is connective tissue proper. It's dense connective tissue. In terms of the locations here, tendons and then ligaments are the main function and main location within connective tissue proper, the dense, regular connective tissue. Dense, irregular connective tissue is in the dermis of the skin. Whereas the dermis of the skin, it's just deep to the epidermis. It's deep to the surface of the skin, somewhere. We won't worry about where that is. All right. Now this is elastic tissue. So now elastic tissue has the protein elastin, and that elastic tissue here allows for the fibers to, they run in multiple directions, and you can pull and tug, and it returns to its original position. The fiber itself, where my pointer is, that's the term elastin. That is a protein that is found as a component of dense regular elastic connective tissue or dense irregular elastic tissue. So what's the difference between the previous slide and this slide? This one has more elastin in it. As a result of this one having more elastin in it, it's not necessarily stronger, but it is able to withstand and respond, go back to its original size. So the example there would be some areas of the vertebrae there, vocal cords, and generally some ligaments. The dense irregular elastic tissue, elastic arteries, and then again, the same place there of the dermis. So arteries have the ability to contract, and then they expand, and then they contract, and then they expand, and as they expand here, you have to get that protein that has to respond or return to original position, and when it responds to original position, that's the job of the elastin. Supportive connective tissue here. Supporting connective tissue there. These are a number of different things, and we're going to stop right after this slide here. But there's a lot of consistency within what we've already talked about in terms of in the context of connective tissue. Number one here, there's a lot of extracellular material. The extracellular material is integral to any type of connective tissue. In this case, we're talking about cartilage. So now that cartilage is built by chondroblasts, and it's maintained by a chondrocyte. So now, adult cartilage or fully developed cartilage is maintained by a chondrocyte. And how do you distinguish between a chondroblast and a chondrocyte? Well, when you find a chondrocyte in a space, that space is called a lacunae. That lacunae is a general term, and it's equivalent to a room in this building. So we're in 316, we're not in the hallway, we're not downstairs, we're not on a roof, right? We're in this area. So these chondrocytes are going to be located in particular areas, and their job is going to be maintaining that portion of the cartilage for that area. Yes?
Did you say that they were built of chondroblasts?
The cartilage is built by chondroblasts, and then when those chondroblasts, as they age and they develop, they build more and more cartilage, because this is what we're building right here. When we build more cartilage, if you surround the cells in a space called a lacunae, then it becomes a chondrocyte. A chondroblast is immature, and a chondrocyte is mature. There's a lot of this stuff called ground substance, which is an important part of this tissue. That ground substance, again, is the same stuff that we've already talked about, including the proteoglycans, the hyaluronic acid. It's trapping water so that it keeps the tissue fluid. One of the components about this is that it is both avascular and no nerve supply. If it's avascular and no nerve supply, and you break a cartilage, or you tear a cartilage, does that cartilage hurt? Well, there's no nerves there, so no, it doesn't hurt. There's also no avascular, and the prefix A means there's no blood flow, so that it heals very, very slowly, or perhaps not at all. What you're talking about here is having to repair it surgically. There's an area around the cartilage, this prefix peri. So this suffix chondrium means cartilage. Chondrocytes is cartilage, right? Chondro is cartilage. Peri means surrounding it. There's a surface or a structure that is surrounding the cartilage that helps provide the integrity of it. And those are largely built by fibers, and those fibers are fibroblasts. So there's fibroblasts that are superficial, There's chondroblasts that are deep. Those chondroblasts are gonna be making cartilage until they're surrounded by lacunae, and those become chondrocytes. Those fibroblasts are gonna be, when they get surrounded, they're gonna be called fibrocytes. And regardless of what we're talking about in terms of the chondrocytes here, these cells right here, they can make 3 different types of cartilage, including hyaline, fibro, and elastic cartilage. Hyaline cartilage is most abundant, fibrocartilage is the strongest, and elastic cartilage is the weakest, or with the most elastin. So what we're gonna do now, it is 10:25 or so. We're gonna stop right here. If anyone has any questions about what we're doing for this week, please come and see me. If you guys have any questions about what to study or how to study it, so at the very, very least, you should be studying the first 3 chapters over and over and over again, right? Ranging from basic anatomical terminology to the structure of the to the dehydration synthesis and hydrolysis, those macromolecules, drawing a cell. Right? You need to start studying it now. This exam is going to be the hardest exam you've ever experienced at Rhino. And you want to know the next hardest exam? The next exam is going to be harder than this. The 3rd exam is going to be harder than the first two combined. Okay? Yeah.
How many seniors usually fail the first exam?
So, I don't know how many.
What percentage
Depends
of
on
the
years.
class?
Some years, 1 or 2. Other years, virtually every kid in the class.
Oh, darn.
So it depends on what you guys, not you, right? What the class is going to do.